you don't want to put a lot of weight on, don't eat Mars bars, cakes and biscuits and ice creams and these things. Isn't this just common sense? And if people aren't going to do that, what hope have we got that nudges from the government are going to change anything?
Well, so I don't think nudges will. So if you look at...
Or bans then.
Yeah, so I think it is about how your appetite responds to the environment. So some of us, you clearly have an appetite that is naturally slimming, and whereas I have an appetite where I have to resist. I'm constantly working on my weight, and I've become and you begin to notice hunger and how it works, etc. And actually, if you look at people eating ad libitum, so without thinking about it, people eat different amounts. People also have different amounts of hunger hormones going into their body. So people have different appetites, and the problem is that when you're constantly being marketed this stuff, when this stuff is everywhere, it interacts pretty badly, as you can see from the increase in weight over time, with people's evolved appetite. And that is causing a problem. So it's the environment, in the 40s, I'm not sure if you've been into recently, I don't know, probably the worst is Marks and Spencer's. Marks and Spencer's got kind of amazing, it's like a kind of, those mazes you used to go at stately homes. You used to go visit a stately home and you'd pay an extra £1 to go into the maze, and you kind of had to work through it to get your way out. The Marks and Spencer's checkouts now are kind of, sometimes you do a double dogleg through just endless sweets and crisps and cakes. Some people are better, some people are worse. And funnily enough, Tesco's did some work where they reconfigured their stores, some stores, and they sold immediately much less of this stuff. They made less money, but they sold a lot less of it. So it's just
that is a nudge. That's a classic example.
That is a nudge, but it is not a nudge by government, because Tesco's lost money doing it. So it's hard for them to do it independently in a competitive environment. So that's what we argue, which is it has to be pre-competitive. And funnily enough, in Europe now, there is talk about trying to get a group of food. So how can the food industry deal with this without government? Like, can they get into a room? Because the government obviously stops food companies pretty enthusiastically from talking to each other on competition rules. And there's now a question about, can you get people into a room to work out, what are the ground rules? What would we like as the basic regulations of stuff that it wasn't appropriate to do.
The famous level playing field that corporations are so keen on.
Well, that's the problem. As big corporations. So if you look at what's happening now with one of the reasons, and we'll go on to one of the reasons that we chose a tax in the end, and we recommended a fairly weighty salt and sugar tax, which is that the game playing that you can do with a lot of the regulations is very suited to big companies. So if you look, for example, at the aisle end regulations, which is a restriction on promoting particular kinds of foods at the aisle ends.
Yep.
There are all sorts of discussions now going on about how you work your way around that. So, for example, I would not be surprised if we saw in the cereal aisle what looked like an aisle end, but in the middle of an aisle, advertising that stuff.
Right.
So the big companies tend to like some of these rules because they can get round them better than the smaller companies. And
a small shop couldn't do it at all. I think the government's probably given a carve-out for the smaller shops. But this idea that you can't promote so-called junk food, high in fat, sugar and salt, vast quantity of products. The idea that you can't have them near the entrance or near the exit, or near the end of
the whole shop is in the exit. Yeah. So they are different. They're, with any intervention, there are complexities, and it's difficult. It's difficult to work out ways that aren't gameable. You're always going to get gaming. And then the second thing is things like taxes. You've got a complex system, and so anyone would be lying if they said they knew what would happen if you operate, if you put in a certain tax, or no one knew with the sugary drinks levy exactly what was going to happen beforehand when it was brought in. But and if you were operating UK PLC as a private company, in our private companies, when we want to kind of change stuff, what we do is we play with price, we play with product, we play with displays, and we see what happens, and we do rapid testing. And it's very difficult when you're kind of dealing with a national thing, and you've got a tax the sugary drinks levy. In any private company, if you've been introducing that, you would have introduced that, and then you would have tweaked it and changed it, and this isn't working, that's not working. But it's very hard to do all of that stuff. So the natural inertia in the system is pretty high.
Well, if you enjoyed that conversation, why not watch one of these other videos? And while you're here, remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss out on a single IEA broadcast.